Welcome to The Business. I'm Ted Kofi. On this show, we break down business and its impact on Africa and Africans. Business affects every one of us, whoever we are, wherever we are. In the news this week, Nigerian banks are being forced by CBN to refund a total of $8 billion to cover MTN. Chinese President Xi Jinping offers another $60 billion in investment for Africa. And in this week's big story, Theresa May pays the continent a visit. But does this trip smack of Brexit desperation, or could it kickstart a series of mutually beneficial UK-Africa deals? Joining me throughout part one is Vuyiswa Imbongwana, journalist and Africa commentator. Vuyiswa, let's start with this Central Bank of Nigeria story. What do you make of this?
The optimist in me wants to clap for days, Ted.
Right.
But the realist tells me this is a very pragmatic move because we're not long before an election.
Do you think this is the start of a new series of events that's going to come forward? A trend?
Well, it's hard to predict with Nigeria based on past history. We certainly know a history of corrupt activity. But at the end of the day, this looks like an opportunity to show the public at large that we're actually dealing with a problem that has been draining the Nigerian substructural economy and potential for infrastructure development for over 50 years. So this is a deal that speaks more to transparency for me.
Fantastic. So it's a virtue signaler. It shows people that we can be good. But you have to ask the question, how on earth did the regulatory bodies miss fake certificates which enabled $8.1 billion of Nigeria's assets to be transferred to foreign banks?
Well, it kind of goes to show the scale of the problem because we've been talking for decades about Nigeria's corrupt this, Nigeria's corrupt that. Now we see in very visceral, clear form just how deep this rabbit hole is. And it's important to dig out that which does not serve the nation.
Well, that's one to watch for the future. We shall see what happens. Okay, let's move on to this news about Chinese investment. Good news for the continent, surely. 60 billion is a lot of money.
Again, it's another scenario. As with all of African politics with regard to economics, there are at least three layers at play. From the Chinese point of view, of course, it's a fantastic investment. They've had a hard job selling it to their public because the Chinese population sees themselves as poor, just like Britain sees herself as ordinary Brits see themselves as poor, and they get really vexed when they hear about billions of dollars being poured into Africa.
So that shows political muscle and commitment from the Chinese side. They push their boat out.
Yes, but political muscle and commitment to who? More to their long-term interests. And of course, Africa's short-term desperate need is a very good playing chip for anyone with pots of money to come in and strike a deal. Terrific. Excuse my cynicism, but history does not make me feel any investor comes to Africa, for our benefit.
Excellent. You're going on the past record. But looked at from another point of view...
What else can we go upon apart from the past record?
Yeah, certainly. But looked at from this point of view, there is another alternative kind of viewpoint on this, isn't there? In that, does this potentially give Africa the whip hand by being able to play off the Chinese against the Americans, against the Brits, against the Germans and other people? Does this give Africa the whip hand?
The optimist in me really wants to think that there are a group of really bright-minded entrepreneurial ministers within Nigeria who will talk about this vision of how to get advantage for us. But unfortunately, we're still too fragmented for that level of unity. Prime example being how ineffective the African Union is. So, or as much as we may wish it, it's still a process, and we're just at the beginning of that process, and certainly the public push will be for more joined-up thinking between not just Nigerian politicians, but African politicians to take advantage of our incredible economic resources.
So it's interesting to note, though, isn't it, that if Africa were to coalesce her assets and her potential things would work out so much better for each individual country.
You would think so. I mean, it's almost as simple as ABC on a logical level. But this doesn't ever get discussed in the field of finances. That's why I find your show absolutely fantastic, because you bring it down to grassroots. More cooperation, better generation of income, better for all.
Well, it looks as if this is going to be a story to watch. The Chinese have set the bar very high, and we shall see how that one plays out. And now our big story of the week. She may be fighting on all fronts here at home, but Theresa May managed to find time to visit South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. Now, what message do you think she was trying to send by this junket?
Well, to the British public, it definitely is a message that is showing, hey, look, we're making some long-term financial plans here that are going to reap some very rich rewards. That's what they have to sell to the public. And certainly history has proven them right, because the whole Western industrial infrastructure is built upon the expropriation of African wealth in one form or another.
But the key thing is that many of her detractors have said that actually they're spending too much on foreign aid. How will this trip be different?
Of course, that's always the argument, whether it's, aid to help starving children in Ethiopia, that's always the argument. But every government has found a way of just batting that aside for the bigger long-term agenda of securing economic footholds in key resource-rich areas which are not fully publicized, but which they are fully aware of in the future.
Not fully publicized is
Of
the
course
key
not.
word. But, and in this regard, you have to ask yourself, there's a huge, massive gap in Theresa May's CV for doing business with Africa. She's never been to sub-Saharan Africa once in her life. The only time she went to the continent, the bodily continent of Africa, was on a terrorism-related issue in Tunisia.
Yes.
Is this lady equipped to do what she has to do in Africa?
Never mind what you think of her as a person. Her role, when she steps on African soil, is to fulfill a very clear political agenda. She's not there on holiday. And when she was there for a terrorism assessment, that wasn't a holiday trip either. And when she's going to Nigeria and saying, look, I can solve the biggest thorn in your side, Boko Haram, of course she's going to be welcomed with a red carpet.
Well, the interesting thing is that if you look at Theresa May's claims, they are absolutely enormous. Right now, she's lying number 2 behind the United States of America in terms of inward investment into continental Africa. But she plans to be number 1 of the G7 states in investment by 2022. Do you think that's possible?
I think in theory it's possible, and it's certainly locking in this post-Brexit look about this little island. And she's seeking to trigger some really warm, fuzzy feelings about previous colonial relations where Africa benefited. And this actually might work with certain corrupt African governments who are looking for what looks, at least in the short term, an easy way out.
But it's interesting, isn't it, that Africa is starting to reimagine her future. Africa does not want to replace and replicate the mistakes of the past. Do you think that Britain has the mentality to be able to engage with this new outlook and actually leverage it to Britain and Africa's interests?
Do you know what? It's really exciting, especially with the onset of the internet, because information is key. You can keep people down because they're just lacking information, they just didn't know. But now we know, we've got access to the whole historical network. And therefore, it's a much more even playing field. It's the most even playing field our continent has ever had with regard to engaging with the rest of the world and former colonial powers. So I'm really optimistic about how things will play out in the future, because at the very least, it will create very, very interesting, stimulating debates for our nations so that we can challenge our governments based on real facts, because we've got them at our fingertips and we can see the pattern. I mean, based on Theresa May's lack of physical rhythm, I'm not too optimistic about how she's actually going to
You have to ask that
put the
question.
plan.
Okay, let's take one last look at this. Actually, the interest of Africa is massive infrastructural development. That's what the Chinese are playing to with that 60 billion.
Yes.
Britain is interested in selling goods and services as a latter-day trading partner of Britain. Forget the fact that there is already a 2-tier Commonwealth, with most of the sub-Saharan African states being in the second class of that tiering. Do you really believe that Africa's interests will coincide beyond security with the United Kingdom?
I think it's a process. It has to evolve organically, but the speed at which it evolves is very much dependent on the African nations and their willingness to just open the door under any terms. As an ordinary citizen, I want to know what exactly are these trade terms and how favorable are they to Africa? We don't know.
It's very interesting to see. And because this is such an important story, I'm sure we're all going to have to keep an eye out on this one. Thank you, Vuiswa. Join me in part 2 when I'll be talking to Priscilla Nwippo about a new bank account designed to empower and benefit Nigerian women in the diaspora. Welcome back to The Business, the show where we break down business and its impact on Africa and Africans. I'm Ted Kofi, and I'm joined now by Priscilla Nwippo, broadcaster and analyst. Welcome, Priscilla.
Thank you for having me, Ted.
Now, you're here to tell us about a new type of bank account aimed at women in the African diaspora, but you see it as more than that, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
In what way?
Well, it's the first bank of Nigeria. They are first bank because they were the very first bank in Nigeria, established, and currently they have the first female board chair of the board. Never had that before in Nigeria, and it's over 100 years existence. And she's come on board. This is a woman who is, I mean, she's successful in her own right. Sits on many boards, very good. You know, her business success rate wonderful. And since her arrival, she's pushing the drive for women now. And it's all about empowering women. It's about their finances. It's about their ability to not just rely on the men, if you like, but to also have their own financial stability and to be able to be a helping hand to one another within the Nigerian society.
That's fantastic. Because, I mean, half the population, or slightly more than half the population, is female. And if you can get them productive with financial instruments, financial products and so on, but you can leverage their talent and ability, it's got to be a win for everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, what is especially good about it is that she started a program that she called First Gem. And in First Gem, it's all about women. It's about women not only having access to the financial products available to them and instruments, but it's also giving them an opportunity to, she's teaching them, she brings together a lot of other high-profiled women who are equally as successful in the financial field, and they, you know, they go ahead to teach other women.
How do they kind of impart their knowledge? They got the product, they got to popularize it. Do they have programs of marketing and outreach?
This is what happened here in the UK. So they brought that program to the UK here, and they had, I think it must have been in excess of about 300 women in the room. Each of them spoke, and they spoke very candidly about their journey, about their challenges, about their experiences, and encouraged the women to do the same or to do better. The importance of being amongst individuals that can help you to grow, develop your business. The importance of also being in business and being financially successful and savvy.
It's interesting though, I mean, women have always been in Africa. Why now? Why has this, as you describe it, it's self-evidently, obviously a brilliant idea. Why has it taken so long? Why now?
I think that's a question for the planet, isn't it, when we say why now where women are concerned, because you would think that women having fought for over 100 years to be recognized within society, that we should be perhaps not fully equal, but at par with men. But it's still not the case. And so there's still a need for that drive and for that push to get the women into the boardroom, to get them more successfully running their businesses, to get them more financially secured, to get them more doing what needs to be done on the financial side within society. Because if they are empowered financially, I think, you know, they will also be able to encourage their fellow women to be in positions, political
it's
positions.
It's a culture that rolls itself out.
Absolutely.
It has a snowballing effect, doesn't it?
Oh, yes.
Okay, what does good look like for the bank and this new product?
Well, the bank has what they call first diasporas, which are like diasporan accounts. Mm-hmm. These bank accounts are specifically for those who live in the diaspora. Mm-hmm. And so you can open your bank account and pay in your dollars if you're in the US, mm-hmm. pay in your euros if you're in Europe, mm-hmm. and here in London, your pounds. Right. And you should be able to withdraw the equivalent when you get to Nigeria, right. without any issues. Okay. And so we were educated on the fact that these different products exist, not just for personal use, but also for business as well. Right. So all of that were there.
Now, is this chain only between the diaspora and Nigeria for now, or do they anticipate that they can roll this out to the rest of the continent? Because who wouldn't want it?
I believe that they have. She did make mention of the fact that they have branches in other African countries. I think it's probably concentrated in West Africa at the moment, right. And I believe that anybody that is within those countries that the branches exist can right. access and utilize the facilities and services available.
Absolutely. Now let's just take a quick look at a bit of the interview you had with this lady. Tell us a little bit about the context and where it was and what you were talking with her about.
Okay, so this was over at Crown Plaza Hotel here in London, and she was holding the first GEM, or the first for us here in the UK, mm-hmm. Event. Right. And she had various speakers with her. As I mentioned earlier, over 300 women in attendance. Mm-hmm. And these were for women who either were in business or thinking about starting business. And so they went through...
Back in Nigeria or here in the UK?
Here in the United Kingdom.
Fantastic.
And, it was a great event because, women got to listen to them, as I said earlier, very right. candidly, right. and ask questions. Right. And they were also directed to the various instruments available that they could use.
To facilitate.
To facilitate their businesses, to grow, to develop their businesses.
Okay, let's take a look at the clip.
We're here in Canary Wharf today discussing the First Bank, First GEM. Tell us a little bit about what that is all about, for you especially.
Okay, First GEM for us at First Bank, it's a commitment to investing in building and empowering women with financial knowledge, and beyond that, helping them to build personal wealth, even as we equip them to be the best of themselves in whatever is their chosen area. So what we've done is to create a shared platform where information is shared, where people can empower themselves through different learnings that are shared there. And also we've created financial instruments that helps them to have what we call targeted savings, which is then invested in whatever part of the viable sectors that they choose. For us, it's the long-term aspiration to make women key parts of the economy, whether in building resources to invest in their businesses, building resources to invest in properties, building resources to educate their children, building resources for their retirement, or whatever it is that they choose to do. The most important thing for us is that we have a tribe of enlightened and empowered women who are major contributors to the economy of Nigeria.
Making women key parts of the economy, that's the message that came across. She's really going to give women a stake in Nigeria's development, isn't she?
Absolutely, and I think it's so necessary. As you said earlier, women are a little over half of the population.
Absolutely.
And I think it's only fair that they equally participate in the economy in other ways, other than, in the ways that they have been participating.
But can I ask you another thing, Priscilla? What about the rollout for this? Is there any coaching? Is there any mentoring involved? You've provided them with the instruments, with the tools. Now, are they going to teach them how to use those tools?
I believe they do. I believe all the women that came along, their details were collated, and I believe that they will have successive emails and various information that will be passed through to them, and once you become part of the club, from my understanding, then you begin to benefit from, as she said, you know, the instruments and the assistance that is there, so that women are able to not just have business ideas, but they can get those ideas going, they can execute them, they can develop them, but they can sustain those ideas more importantly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
How did this product make you feel?
I thought
Speaking as a woman, not as a professional necessarily.
As a woman, I thought it was fantastic, because I think that, you know, we all need that help. We need that support. We need to know where to go to when you have a business idea, a concept, and you need to know I mean, what was really interesting was after the event, women were just networking with each other, taking each other's phone numbers.
Real shot in the arm.
Oh yes,
That's fantastic.
And some saying, you know, I didn't know that I could find women who were doing
this sort of thing.
So you can
That's
imagine
terrific.
when they come
Yes.
together,
Yes.
they will be able to do a lot more, and they can secure each other and help one another move up the ladder.
And of course,
within their businesses.
we can see the whole of this interview with you interviewing her on one-to-one.
Absolutely. One-to-one here on Yanga TV.
Yeah.
You can catch the full interview with myself. And I think it's very interesting and important, and it will certainly help women. She's a great advocate for women in herself. And also in her business career, she's been very, very successful.
Inspirational.
Yeah.
Priscilla, thank you very much for spending your time with us, sharing this interview with us, and look forward to seeing you another time.
Thank you very much, Ted. Pleasure.
And that's all we have time for. Thank you for watching The Business, and please join us again next time.